Well, my name is Duncan Stuart. I'm an architect by profession, but I've been producing and presenting television documentaries for the last 25 years. A lot on home improvement, but most of them on environmental topics. And my current series is called Eco-Eye.
And when did you learn about the incinerator being built in the recent years?
I heard about the incinerator here in Dublin Bay being built with the possibility of it being constructed at least 10 years ago, if not more. And over that time, obviously, changes have happened to the design of incinerators. They've been improved, of course, over that time. They're not as bad as they were. But the reality of the incinerator in Dublin Bay only became kind of known to most people when Covanta got a contract a couple of years ago. And at that time then we understood what they were going to be doing, the type of incinerator, what the issues that needed to be addressed in that incinerator. And there was a lot of concern about it at the time.
And do you say this has affected the community in any ways since it's been built?
Well, certainly the local community here in Sandymount and Ringsend were very concerned about this incinerator and what effects it could have on their health. And also issues concerning the transport of all those trucks into the area. So there was a lot of real concern. Now, a lot of that, of course, that concern doesn't necessarily mean it's based on fact, of course, but people will be worried about these sort of things, and rightly so. But the realities of what is now going to be the outcome of this, first of all, there has been certain mistakes made already, and certainly over the next 10 years, we don't know what the impacts are going to be, because a lot of these effects can be long-term effects, such as carcinogenic effects or lung cancer effects. So these are things that are not yet known, and we still don't know, at least I don't know, what is the mix of gases that are being released by the chimney stack. And that's really serious, because we need to know every amount type and what amount, and we also need to know where those plumes of gases from are going to land, and where it will impact when they create concentrations, whether it's out in the ocean, which will affect wildlife and sea life, or whether it's going to come inland at times when the wind changes and blows from the east into Dublin, into Ringsend, into Sandymount, but even further into the city, because you get effects right through the city. Obviously, they'll be concentrated more locally close to where the source is.
And in your opinion, what more eco-friendly alternatives could there have been than the incinerator? Would there have been anything better?
Yes, obviously, the whole issue now of what we do with waste is a big issue. And landfill is not a good solution, obviously. And we've run out of landfill sites anyway in Ireland. But the real choices that we need to deal with waste, of course, is prevention. We have to prevent waste occurring. We have to kind of be part of the circular economy, which is the European initiative now, to make sure that everything is recycled or reused and repurposed, if you like, within a closed cycle, a closed loop, called, if you like, a cradle-to-cradle approach to waste. Now that means there would be no waste, it would be zero waste, basically. That's the ultimate. Obviously, that's hard to achieve, a zero waste. But we can reduce the amount of waste down to a fraction. And if one choice is landfill, well, that's a very bad example. But incineration is not perfect either. And they're the only two alternatives we have. At the moment, we're exporting all of that waste because we privatized our waste a couple of years ago. So it's private operators now that are really carrying out most of the waste collection process. And now that most of that is going abroad, because the landfill levy, which is €75 a tonne, if you like, discourages people putting them into landfill, which is good that that does happen. But the trouble is it's going abroad, it's going into incinerators. Those countries don't want that waste anymore. They're reducing their incinerator because they know the damage it's doing. And of course that's creating huge amounts of carbon emissions into the atmosphere. Added to that is the transport, of course, of the ship, so that makes it worse. But that huge amount of greenhouse gas emissions going into the atmosphere, together with all those pollutants in those countries, is not a good solution. However, to do it here in Ireland, it might reduce the amount of transport emissions and handle it here in Ireland, And that's better that it's handled in Ireland, that we handle our own waste, but it's not the best option. There are much, much better options to deal with the whole resource efficiency of all our consumption, basically.
And so do you think in authorising the construction of the incinerator, Dublin City Council kind of copping out or taking the easy way out and just going straight for the easy way of getting rid of our problems?
I don't like blaming Dublin City Council themselves, because there are a lot of good people in there and it's a good organisation, but certainly the decision that was made here was a very short-term, if you like, quick fix solution to deal with the problem of waste where landfill was running out and where there wasn't enough, if you like, and certainly there wasn't enough other alternatives readily available, because obviously it takes time for people to kind of move to prevention of waste, reduction of waste, into reuse of waste rather than recycling. You know, obviously recycling depends on whether it's upcycling or whether it's downcycling. And downcycling is kind of when it goes to places like incineration, because it creates a lot of impacts. When you burn waste, all those gases that aren't collected in the flue gas system through scrubbers and other mechanisms for reducing the amount of pollutants going up into the atmosphere, there are massive problems. And certainly all of the CO2 that's produced goes up into the atmosphere. So when you compare it with, say, other forms of power generation, like, say, for example, gas-fired power generation, in my opinion, this is much worse than gas-fired power generation, in that the efficiency of burning has to be much lower. Those figures need to be checked, by the way, but in my view, they would be in a mass burn situation. It would be a bit like burning coal. And the fuel going into it is mostly plastic. And that plastic is very carbon intensive. It's oil, basically. And when you're burning plastic, it's burning it less efficient than burning, say, oil itself. So it's a more carbon intensive way than burning oil. The question is it more carbon intensive even than coal or even peat, which are both very bad? I don't know the figures, but we should know those figures and they should be made public. And certainly I think you as citizens are entitled to this, and especially you as a young generation, because all that greenhouse gas emissions accumulating in the atmosphere is going to affect your future. It's the most serious existential threat facing all of us, and especially for your generation. So we have to get off burning fossil fuel. And what is being burnt there is not green waste. It is carbon-intensive fossil fuel, plastics and other waste.
Referring to the construction of the incinerator, in total cost 600 million, just over, I think.
Is that it?
Yeah. Do you think that's financially viable to be built in such a small area?
Well, if you look at the cost of building this incinerator for 600,000 tonnes of waste, I believe it cost in the region of 600 million, in that order. I'm not sure about that figure, but if it is, first of all, it's way too big. You know, taking waste all the way from Leinster makes no sense. It could have been a third of the size rather than the large size. Now, all of the waste companies will say there's an economic viability size. In other words, a critical mass or economy of scale to a plant like this to make it economic. But in my view, the size of that thing is like a monster out there waiting to be fed. And it'll be very hungry, and when it is hungry, it'll be looking for waste further afield, from further distance than more than Leinster probably, which is really serious, to be transporting all that distance through Dublin City. Already it's bad enough where it's coming from. But also, quite likely, who knows, in the future, because it's out in the bay, could they possibly start importing waste from other countries? And could we end up having to process other people's waste in this very kind of damaging way? I'd be concerned about all of those issues. So, in my view, it would have been so much better to go down the other route of minimising waste, reusing where we can, and creating industries through recycling of waste into upcycling opportunities where they would generate employment rather than burning it. I mean, burning it, in my view, is the worst thing you can really do with anything. I mean, that's creating emissions.